A number of people have asked me to describe Digibrony the character and how he might be different from Digibrony as a representation of myself. I wanted to try and reveal facts about Digibrony using short fanfics, subtle hints in my videos, and things like that, but since fanfics aren't really my thing, I figured making an analysis video about it would be much easier. I'm a lot better at just explaining these kinds of things if I haven't made that evident already. Digibrony is a fun character because he simultaneously is myself as well as a separate entity. For all intents and purposes, he is Digibro, the human brony that writes analysis on the internet. But he also is Digibrony, an analytically minded pony living in Ponyville. Digibrony shares all of my thoughts and memories, but he also has his own, which I can interpret as my own as well. None of our feelings are independent of one another, even if they don't define one another. After all, Digibrony exists inside of my head since he's a fictional character, so he can't have thoughts without me having given thoughts to him. If he were to have thoughts independent of me, then I wouldn't know about them unless they were someone else's thoughts given to him, which were then shared with me, a la fanfiction. Digibrony lives in Ponyville and is familiar and even friendly with some of the main characters of MLP. Because he has all of my thoughts, he understands these characters both as ponies that exist and as the cast of a TV show. So everything in his world has a dual existence. For instance, to him, Ponyville is both a town designed and built by architect ponies and a town conceptualized and drawn by the creators of the show. I realize this is a little bit of a headfuck, so I'll move along to what things actually set Digibrony the character apart from the human that he represents. Digibrony lives in the second story of a house in Ponyville, stationed over a laboratory run by scientist ponies, who rent the space out to him. His room has one of the only computers in Ponyville and is full of weird contraptions and half-finished experiments, similar to that of Sherlock Holmes in the Guy Ritchie movies. The duality by which he recognizes Ponyville residents makes them difficult to talk to, and he always feels that he has to hold back in conversation, which has left him rather reserved. He likes to observe ponies from a distance and admire them. He has a bit of a crush on Pinkie Pie, which I wrote a fanfic about from his perspective, which is linked in the description, and also has a crush on Applejack, which is more or less because of me. Digibrony is a huge fan of all four of Equestria's princesses and finds them both fascinating and inspiring. In particular, he is a hardcore loyalist to Princess Celestia. Beyond those elements, Digibrony's life is still pretty mysterious, since I haven't dreamed it up yet. It would be interesting to see what kind of life Digibrony might have outside of my own mind, as well as what kind of things I might dream up for him to do in the future. And then we have Discorded Digibrony, who is an even more interesting character. This one will require some canon dumping, including major spoilers for the Discorded Digibrony Ask Tumblr if that's something you actually were worried about getting spoiled for. Discorded Digibrony lives in an alternate universe that I've come to refer to as the Spiteverse, which was created at a divergent point during the events of Return of Harmony. In our universe, as seen in the Thoroughly Fanboying video, Digibrony was discorded but was returned to normal by Brony Curious, who showed him a bunch of his old videos just as Celestia did for Twilight Sparkle. However, the Spiteverse is a reality in which Discord won, both in the show's canon and in Digibrony's canon. The point of divergence happens right after Discord corrupts Twilight Sparkle and Twilight is planning to leave Ponyville. In this timeline, Discord immediately traveled to Canterlot and murdered Princess Celestia and Luna so that no one would stand who could oppose him. Twilight never remembered all the friendship lessons and the entirety of Equestria was discorded. However, Twilight still hated Discord for what he did, and she learned to harness the elements of disharmony in order to create a new dark magic. Twilight remained the most powerful magic user in Equestria, and her magic became synonymous with disharmony as opposed to friendship. She overpowered and destroyed Discord, became an alicorn, and took over the reins of Equestria as the Princess of Spite. Discorded Digibrony lives in this world, and while he hates Twilight Sparkle and what has become of the world, he doesn't actually remember what it was like to be Digibrony. Unlike Digibrony, while Discorded Digibrony likewise exists inside of my own head and has the history and personality that I give him, he does not have my knowledge or memories the way that Digibrony does, meaning that he is purely a fictional character rather than a metafictional one. Nevertheless, he still has a lot of Digibrony's likes and dislikes, but approaches things in a different way. Whereas Digibrony thinks that analysis is inherently subjective and totally dependent on the person making the analysis, Discorded Digi thinks that analysis should be based on examining objective truths and making quality judgments. Whereas Digibrony has a positive, extremely optimistic attitude and approach to everything, Discorded Digibrony has a negative, extremely pessimistic approach to everything. Like Digibrony, Discorded Digibrony is aware of My Little Pony the TV show, but he sees it as propaganda created by the Spitacorn overlords, and he sees bronies as ignorant people with the wrong idea of what's really happening in the the MLP universe. He isn't aware that his timeline has diverged from the original one. However, not everything in his world is darkness and gloom. While he's usually angry in his replies on the Ask Discord at Digibrony Tumblr, that's mostly out of spite towards bronies and because he doesn't like a lot of the questions. While Disco Digi is uptight and suffers from depression, he still has levity in his life like everyone else. And in this universe, he's actually married to Discorded Applejack. Also, the Ask Discord at Digibrony timeline takes place 5 years after our own. So that about sums up what I've dreamed up for these two characters. I'd love to flesh them out more in the future through fanfics and stuff, and if you want to write fanfics about them yourself, then be my guest. It would be interesting to see just how many divergent canons and interpretations could come out of these characters, and I'm sure that the Spiteverse could be opened up into its own expansive fanfic universe over time. I'm definitely looking forward to fleshing it out more over the course of the Ask Discord at Digibrony Tumblr myself. By the way, if having all of this come out of Digibrony's mouth isn't the most confusing thing ever, then I just don't know what is.
And I just couldn't keep my eyes straight, even before it began. But this history was rewritten to include silly things, but now I never want to see her again.